I discovered the full depth of my wife's betrayal not in whispers or suspicions, but in broad daylight where she thought I would crumble. But I am not a man who breaks when the foundation shifts beneath him. My name is Cole Barrett, and I'm 42 years old. Each morning I wake before dawn in the house my mother left me, making coffee while reviewing the careful preparations that saved my future. The signs had been there for months. Kendra, my wife of 15 years with her late meetings and secretive texts. Luke, our 18-year-old son, deserved better than watching his family implode on his graduation day. Darren Hayes, Kendra's subordinate at work, thought he could step into my life without consequences. Alicia Park, my attorney, helped me ensure they were both wrong. I won't be discarded like something disposable after giving everything to build this family. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I woke to the gentle hum of birds outside my window on Luke's graduation day. The sky glowed pink-orange as I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Kendra. Some mornings deserve to start quietly, with intention. The coffee maker gurgled downstairs as I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching the pot fill. 18 years had passed in the blink of an eye. My boy was graduating today. I ran my thumb over a chip in my favorite mug, the one Luke had given me for Father's Day when he was 8, with "World's Okayest Dad" printed in fading letters. The ceramic felt cool against my palm, familiar. The front door clicked open, and Mara stepped in carrying a box of donuts. My sister never needed an invitation. She'd been my rock through everything. "Morning, graduation, Dad," she said, setting the box on the counter. "Thought we could use some sugar for the big day." I poured her coffee, black with 1 sugar, just like she'd taken it since high school. "Thanks for coming early. Wouldn't miss it." She took a sip, studying my face. "You sleep at all?" "Enough." I shrugged. "Just can't believe we're here already. Seems like yesterday I was teaching him to tie his shoes." The memory hit me. Luke, 5 years old, tongue poking out in concentration as his small fingers fumbled with laces. I'd knelt beside him on this very kitchen floor, patient, showing him the rabbit ear method until his face broke into that gap-toothed smile of triumph. "He's a good kid, Cole. You did that." Mara squeezed my arm. I nodded, not trusting my voice for a moment. "Cameras charged and ready. Got extra memory cards, too." "Of course you do." She laughed softly. "Always prepared." If she only knew how prepared I actually was, for everything that would come later. Luke stumbled downstairs around 7, his hair sticking up at odd angles. He grabbed a donut, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Big day, kid," I said, ruffling his hair like I used to when he was small. He ducked away, but I caught the smile. "Dad, come on, I gotta look good in the pictures." "You'll look perfect," I promised. The drive to the school was quiet. Kendra sat beside me, scrolling through her phone. I noticed she'd dressed more carefully than usual, new blouse, hair freshly styled. At the time, I thought it was for Luke. Now I understand she was dressing for her announcement, for her new beginning. The graduation was just convenient timing. The school parking lot overflowed with cars and families clutching flowers. Luke adjusted his cap, looking suddenly grown in his blue gown. My chest tightened with a pride so fierce it almost hurt. "Stand by the oak tree," I directed, lifting my camera. Through the viewfinder, I captured my son, tall and serious, the tassel swinging slightly in the breeze. I took shot after shot, trying to freeze this moment before everything changed. "Dad, that's enough." Luke laughed after the 20th photo. "Just one more," I said, as I always did. "You only graduate high school once." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of speeches and names. When they called Luke Barrett, my heart stopped, then raced as he walked across the stage. I stood, clapping until my hands stung, watching him accept his diploma with that half-smile he'd perfected as a teenager, the one that tried to hide how pleased he was. Mara grabbed my arm, her eyes misty. "He looks just like you did," she whispered. After the ceremony, we headed downtown to Carluccio's, Luke's favorite restaurant since he was 12. The waitstaff knew us there, congratulated Luke with a special dessert menu waiting at our table. Kendra's parents joined us, sitting stiffly in their pressed clothes, offering Luke an envelope I knew contained a check. Conversation flowed around appetizers and drinks. Luke talked about his summer plans before college. I watched Kendra across the table, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way she checked her phone beneath the tablecloth. I mistook it for work stress, maybe impatience with her parents. How wrong I was. As our entrees arrived, Kendra reached for her water glass and tapped it with her fork. The small chime silenced the table. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice steady, almost rehearsed. She looked directly at me, her eyes cool. "I'm leaving Cole tonight." The words landed like a physical blow. Luke's fork clattered against his plate. Mara gasped beside me. Kendra's parents stared down at their food, saying nothing. They'd known, I realized in that moment. They'd known and said nothing. I felt the restaurant close in around me, but beneath the shock was a current of readiness. I'd seen this coming in a dozen small betrayals. I'd prepared while she thought I was oblivious. Without speaking, I reached into my jacket and withdrew an envelope. Across the white tablecloth, I slid it toward her with one finger. Kendra stared at it. "What's this?" "Open it," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. She tore the seal, pulling out the contents. Divorce papers already filed. Trust documents protecting Luke's college fund with Mara as trustee. Bank statements showing closed joint accounts and photos. Kendra and Darren entering the Birchwood Inn on nights she'd claimed to be working late. Her face drained of color, then flushed red as she looked up at me. "You," she choked, then screamed across the table. "You set me up. You set me up." Kendra's voice echoed across the restaurant, drawing stares from nearby tables. I held her gaze across the white tablecloth. No, I protected what matters. My pulse hammered against my collar, but I kept my voice level. Years of managing workshop crises had taught me that the loudest person rarely wins. "What's going on?" Luke's voice cracked as he looked between us, his graduation tassel still looped around his fingers. I turned to him. "Your mom and I will explain everything later. This isn't about you." Kendra rifled through the papers, her manicured nails creasing the edges. "You can't do this. You can't lock me out of my own home." "It's not yours," I said, pointing to the third page. "That's the trust document from my mother's estate. The house was placed in trust before we married. You knew that when you signed our prenup." Her parents shifted uncomfortably. Her father suddenly found his water glass fascinating. "And what's this?" She jabbed at the next document, though she clearly understood. "That's a declaration of trust for Luke's college fund. Mara is the trustee." I glanced at my sister, whose face remained calm despite the storm around us. "The money can only be used for his education. Neither of us can touch it." Kendra's eyes narrowed. "You put your sister in charge of our son's future." "I put someone trustworthy in charge," I said. The words hung between us like smoke. Her fingers trembled as she reached the last pages. The evidence. Hotel receipts. Time-stamped photos of her car next to Darren's at the Birchwood Inn. Screenshots of texts she thought I'd never see. "You've been spying on me?" She pushed back from the table, her chair scraping across the floor. "No. I've been protecting myself since I found the first hotel charge 3 months ago." I leaned forward. "You weren't exactly subtle, Kendra. Darren's name showed up on your phone every time you turned it over. Remember how we used to drive past the Birchwood Inn on Sunday afternoons? How she'd always say the wraparound porch reminded her of a place from some old movie? The memory twisted in my chest like a knife. "Mom?" Luke whispered, his face pale. His graduation dinner shattered around him. Kendra ignored him, her fury focused entirely on me. "You can't lock me out of my home. Again, it's not yours, never was." I tapped the divorce petition. "I'm requesting temporary exclusive possession during mediation. You can take the newer car, your personal belongings, and your fair share of our marital assets." "Fair share?" She laughed without humor. "I gave you 15 years. And I gave you 15 honest ones back," I replied, heat finally creeping into my voice. The restaurant had gone quiet around us. At nearby tables, people pretended not to listen while hanging on every word. "You're trying to ruin me," she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. "No." I shook my head. "You're trying to cash me out. I'm making sure Luke's future and my house don't become payments on your fresh start." She stood, gathering the papers and shaking hands. Darren was right about you. You've always been controlling. Is that what he tells you while you're breaking company policy? I asked quietly. Dating your direct report violates at least 3 HR regulations. Her face flushed deep red. For a moment, I thought she might throw something. Instead, she leaned across the table, her voice venom-sharp. You set me up. No, I said, holding her stare. You set yourself on fire. I moved the matches. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit. Her parents rose awkwardly, her father dropping cash on the table before following her out. Mara reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Luke sat frozen, his graduation dinner in ruins around him. I'll get the check, I said, signaling the waiter. Outside in the parking lot, Kendra's car was already gone. Luke stood with his shoulders hunched, looking suddenly younger than 18. Dad, what happens now? He asked. I pulled him into a hug, feeling his resistance melt after a moment. You go to college. You live your life. This isn't your problem to fix. But where will I stay? Where will Mom go? You can stay with me as much as you want, I said. Your room is still your room. Mara approached, car keys in hand. I should head home. Call me later? I nodded, grateful for her steady presence. We said our goodbyes, and I drove Luke home in silence. The house felt different when we arrived, tense and fragile, as if the walls themselves sensed the fracture. Luke headed straight to his room, mumbling something about calling friends. I sat alone in the darkened living room, listening to the familiar creaks of the house my mother had left me. Upstairs, I could hear Kendra moving around in our bedroom, soon to be just my bedroom. Drawers opening and closing, closet doors sliding. I wondered what she would do next, how far she would go, whether Darren was already coaching her through her next move. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily forward, marking the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. The next morning, I left the house before dawn. Sleep had been elusive, with Kendra shifting between the bedroom and guest room, drawers slamming until nearly midnight. I'd lain awake planning my next moves while the ceiling fan clicked rhythmically above me. Alicia Park's law office occupied a converted Victorian house downtown, its wood-paneled interior more comforting than intimidating. Her assistant ushered me into a conference room with windows overlooking a small garden. You look like you haven't slept, Alicia said, walking in with a legal pad tucked under her arm. She was direct that way, no sugarcoating, just facts. I haven't, I admitted, sliding a folder across the polished table. Here are copies of everything I've already filed, plus the additional bank statements showing the hotel charges. Alicia flipped through the papers methodically. You did exactly what I advised. The trust documentation for Luke's college fund is particularly solid. Naming Mara as trustee was smart. My sister's the most responsible person I know. And legally distanced from the divorce proceedings, Alicia nodded. That's what makes it work. What happens next? I asked, rubbing my temples. Kendra will be served today if she hasn't been already. Once that happens, the temporary orders take effect. No draining accounts, no selling assets, everything preserved until court decides. Alicia leaned forward. She'll likely file her own motions quickly. Expect claims for spousal support, exclusive use of the home, and inflated expense declarations. I nodded. I'm prepared for that. The good news is you've already secured what matters most, Luke's education and your house. She tapped the trust documents. Your mother's foresight in creating that family trust was fortunate. Mom always said protect what matters. The memory of her practical wisdom still steadied me. I could almost smell her garden-stained work gloves hanging by our back door. One more thing, Alicia said, her tone shifting. Don't engage in arguments, document everything. If Kendra tries to provoke you, walk away and text me immediately. I understand. The judge will see the timeline. Alicia closed the folder. She waited until your son's graduation to blindside you, then got angry when you were prepared. That speaks volumes. The drive home felt longer than usual. I gripped the steering wheel, rehearsing calm responses to whatever might await me. When I pulled into the driveway, Kendra's car was still there. Inside, the house echoed with a strange tension. I found Kendra in our bedroom, a suitcase open on the bed. She didn't acknowledge me when I stood in the doorway. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. I watched her face soften into a smirk as she typed a response. Darren sending encouragement? I asked quietly. Her head snapped up. My relationships are none of your business anymore. They are when they affect my son. I leaned against the doorframe. You've been served? Your ambush papers? Yes. She shoved a blouse into the suitcase. My lawyer says your trust won't hold up. Your lawyer is welcome to challenge a 20-year-old family trust that predates our marriage. I kept my voice neutral. I won't interfere with you leaving, Kendra. The court documents will control what happens next. Her phone buzzed again, 3 times in rapid succession. Her fingers flew across the screen, then she looked up with narrowed eyes. This isn't over, Cole. Not by a long shot. I simply nodded and walked downstairs to make coffee. That evening, Kendra cornered me in the foyer as I sorted through mail. Her eyes were hard, her stance combative. I'm going to take everything that matters, she said, her voice low. The house, Luke's loyalty, half your retirement, everything. I set the mail down slowly. You'll get what's fair, not what Darren promised. Don't say his name, she hissed. Why not? He's clearly giving you legal advice. Is that before or after he convinces you to risk your job dating a subordinate? Her face flushed. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Mara stood on the porch holding takeout bags. Dinner, she announced, stepping past Kendra without acknowledging her. Luke said he was studying late, so I brought his favorite. Kendra watched as Mara moved toward the kitchen, unpacking containers of food. I followed, grateful for the interruption. We sat at the kitchen table, Mara, Luke, who emerged from his room at the smell of food, and me. For a brief hour, conversation flowed about normal things. Luke's scholarship applications, Mara's garden plans, a movie we wanted to see together. From the hallway, I caught Kendra watching us, her phone pressed to her ear. Her lips moved in urgent whispers, her eyes never leaving our small circle. As she turned away, I heard her final words clearly. I'll make him regret it. I promise. 3 days later, I sat on a hard wooden bench outside courtroom 4, straightening my tie for the 3rd time. Alicia Park sat beside me, reviewing documents with quiet efficiency. Remember, she said without looking up, let me do the talking unless the judge addresses you directly. I nodded, my throat tight. Got it. The door to the courtroom swung open and Kendra walked in with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman with a permanent frown. My stomach clenched when I spotted Darren trailing behind them, taking a seat in the gallery row directly behind Kendra. He caught my eye and smirked, adjusting his tie with exaggerated movements. Is that him? Alicia whispered. Darren Hayes, I confirmed. Kendra's subordinate at work. Alicia raised an eyebrow. Bold choice to bring him today. The bailiff called the courtroom to order and we filed inside. Judge Harmon, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewed the file as we settled into our seats. This is an emergency hearing regarding temporary orders in Barrett versus Barrett, she announced. I've reviewed both motions. Ms. Winters, as petitioner for these emergency orders, you may begin. Kendra's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client seeks immediate spousal support and exclusive use of the marital home. Mr. Barrett has already demonstrated hostile intent by freezing joint accounts and establishing trusts without my client's knowledge or consent. I gripped the edge of the table, fighting to keep my expression neutral. Judge Harmon turned toward us. Ms. Park? Alicia rose smoothly. Your Honor, the trusts in question were established months ago as responsible financial planning. The home Mr. Barrett currently occupies was inherited from his mother before the marriage and has always been held in a family trust. She handed a folder to the clerk. These documents show the provenance of the property and the trust's establishment date, 12 years before the marriage. The judge reviewed the papers carefully while Kendra whispered furiously to her attorney. As for the college fund, Alicia continued, Mr. Barrett established it to protect their son's education. Given recent discovery of marital misconduct, she handed over another folder. This was prudent protection, not hostility. The judge opened the second folder, which contained the hotel receipts, phone records, and text message logs I'd collected. Kendra's face flushed. He's trying to ruin me, she blurted out. Ms. Barrett, Judge Harmon said firmly, please address the court through your attorney. Kendra's attorney cleared her throat. Your Honor, my client's personal relationships are not relevant to the division of assets. The fact remains that Mr. Barrett has deliberately maneuvered to deprive my client of marital resources. Judge Harmon looked over her glasses. Counsel, I disagree. The timing and nature of these expenditures speak to dissipation of marital assets. She tapped the hotel receipts. These charges were made while the parties were still cohabiting. Behind Kendra, Darren suddenly stood up. Your Honor, if I could just explain. The judge's head snapped up. Sir, are you a party to this case? No, but Then sit down immediately, she ordered. This is not a public forum. Darren's face reddened as he sank back into his seat. I watched from the corner of my eye, a small flicker of satisfaction warming my chest. After 30 more minutes of argument, Judge Harmon made her ruling. The court finds the home in question is legitimately held in trust and predates the marriage. Mr. Barrett shall retain temporary exclusive use. The College Fund Trust appears properly established for the benefit of the minor child and shall remain intact with the current trustee. She peered at Kendra. Ms. Barrett's request for emergency spousal support is denied pending financial disclosure from both parties. We'll set a review hearing in 30 days. As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. In the hallway, Kendra cornered me while Alicia spoke with the clerk. This isn't over, she hissed. Darren will stand by me no matter what. Unlike you, he actually loves me. I looked past her to where Darren paced near the water fountain, angrily typing on his phone. Bringing your boyfriend to our divorce hearing only hurts your case, I said quietly. The judge noticed. You think you're so smart, she spat. You've turned Luke against me too. Luke makes his own decisions, I replied. Maybe ask yourself why he's making them. That evening I stood on the back deck flipping burgers on the grill while Luke set the table on the patio. The normal rhythm of dinner preparation felt healing after the tension of the courtroom. How'd it go today? Luke asked, arranging napkins beside the plates. Better than expected, I said, testing a burger with my spatula. The judge understood about the house and your college fund. Luke nodded, his eyes on the task before him. Was Mom there? Yes. And Darren? His jaw tightened. Together? Yes. We worked in silence for a few minutes. I placed cheese on the burgers and closed the grill lid. Dad? Luke said finally, his voice quieter. Did you know for sure? About Mom and him? Before the graduation dinner? I turned to face my son, seeing the hurt behind his question. I had enough proof to protect us, I answered honestly. Enough to know what was happening and what I needed to do. Luke absorbed this, then nodded once. Then I'm staying with you, he whispered, stepping forward to wrap his arms around me in a tight hug. I held him close, feeling his shoulders shake slightly. The burgers sizzled behind us, forgotten for the moment. I woke up early the next morning before my alarm. The temporary victory in court had given me my first decent night's sleep in weeks. Sunlight streamed through the blinds as I made coffee, waiting for Alicia to email the official temporary orders from the judge. My phone buzzed just after 8. Alicia had sent the documents with a simple message. Good news. Call when you've reviewed. I opened the PDF and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Judge Harmon had granted me exclusive use of the home pending the final hearing. The parenting schedule gave me primary custody during the week, with Kendra getting alternate weekends, exactly the arrangement Luke had wanted. Most importantly, the order specifically mentioned that Luke's college fund was to remain untouched with Mara as trustee. I called Alicia immediately. This is better than we expected, she said when she picked up. Judge Harmon really didn't appreciate Kendra's attempts to drain that college fund. She tried to access it? I hadn't heard this detail. Oh yes. The bank called Mara yesterday to verify the change in signatory authority. Kendra showed up with Darren trying to remove Mara as trustee. The bank manager refused without a court order. My hand tightened around the phone. She brought Darren to try to access Luke's college fund? According to the bank manager, yes. I've requested the security footage for our records. I thanked Alicia and hung up, feeling a mix of anger and vindication. The system was working. The preparations had paid off. I texted Mara about the good news and she replied immediately. Celebrating tonight. Bringing pie. The good kind, not that store-bought nonsense. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope. The house was mine. Luke's future was secure. Kendra's attempts to destroy what we'd built were failing one by one. That evening, Mara arrived with her famous apple pie still warm from the oven. Luke and I had grilled chicken and vegetables, and the three of us ate on the back deck talking about normal things. Luke's scholarship applications, Mara's garden, my latest woodworking project. No divorce talk, no Kendra, no Darren. After dinner, Luke spread his college applications across the dining room table. I sat across from him, helping him organize the essays he needed to write. The house felt alive again, like it was breathing with purpose. "Dad," Luke said, looking up from his laptop, "I think I want to apply for the engineering program at State. Their scholarship deadline is next month." "That's a great program," I replied, proud of how focused he remained despite everything. "Let's mark that deadline on the calendar." We worked companionably until nearly 10, when the doorbell rang. I frowned. It was late for visitors. Through the peephole, I saw a sheriff's deputy standing on the porch, looking uncomfortable. When I opened the door, he handed me a thick envelope. "Mr. Barrett, I'm serving you with this emergency protective order. You need to vacate the premises immediately and have no contact with the protected party." My stomach dropped as I scanned the first page. Kendra had filed for an emergency protection order, claiming I had shoved her during our last custody exchange and made threats against Darren. "This is a mistake," I said, my voice tight. "None of this happened." The deputy looked sympathetic, but firm. "I'm just serving the papers, sir. You have a court date next Tuesday to respond. Until then, you need to gather some belongings and leave." I turned to see Luke standing in the hallway, his face pale with confusion. "Dad?" "It's okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just another legal thing. I need to stay at Aunt Mara's for a few days." I called Mara while I packed a bag, explaining the situation in clipped sentences. She was already clearing space in her spare room when I arrived 30 minutes later. "She's lying," I told Mara as I dropped my duffel bag by her couch. "I never touched her. I never threatened anyone." "I know," Mara said simply. "Everyone who knows you knows that." I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on Mara's couch, reading through Kendra's affidavit line by fabricated line. She claimed I had grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises during our last exchange. She swore I had threatened to make Darren pay. Neither had happened. The custody exchange had been in a public parking lot, with Luke present the entire time. What burned most was the statement from Darren, attached as an exhibit. He claimed to have witnessed a pattern of controlling behavior and feared for Kendra's safety. The man who had helped destroy my marriage was now helping to paint me as dangerous. I stared at those papers until 2 in the morning, anger burning in my chest. But the anger wasn't wild or uncontrolled, it was focused, almost cold. They had escalated from betrayal to lies in court. They had taken my home. They had frightened my son. Proof will shout louder than their lies, I whispered to myself in the darkness of Mara's living room, the affidavit still clutched in my hands. I was at Alicia's office the next morning before they even unlocked the doors. I'd spent the night shifting between anger and disbelief, fueled by too much coffee and not enough sleep. When Alicia arrived, I handed her the protective order without a word. She read through it quickly, her expression hardening with each page. When she finished, she set it down deliberately on her desk. "This is fabricated," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "Every word of it," I confirmed. "I was at the woodshop during the time she claims I was threatening her at home. Luke was with me earlier, then went to a friend's. We met Kendra in the Target parking lot for the handoff. Cameras everywhere, witnesses shopping all around us." Alicia nodded, already making notes. "We need to move fast. This kind of accusation can create lasting damage even when disproven." I leaned forward. "I haven't touched her. Haven't threatened anyone. But these lies..." My voice caught unexpectedly. "My son had to watch me pack a bag and leave our home because of this. We're going to dismantle this piece by piece," Alicia said, her voice calm but determined. "First, I'm sending an investigator to get the security footage from Target. Then we need timestamps from your workshop, clock-in records, anything that puts you physically elsewhere during her alleged incident." "I have the electronic keycard log," I said. The shop records every entry and exit. Perfect. We'll also need statements from Mara confirming where you stayed that night and... She hesitated. If Luke is willing, his testimony would be powerful. My chest tightened. I don't want him dragged into this. I understand, but the judge needs to hear the truth from someone who was actually there. I remembered the look on Luke's face when the deputy arrived. The confusion, the fear. I'll talk to him, I said finally. Over the next 3 days, Alicia built our case methodically. The target security footage showed a calm, brief exchange in the parking lot. My workshop timestamps proved I was across town when Kendra claimed I was at the house. Mara prepared a detailed affidavit about my whereabouts. And Luke, my brave, steady son, agreed to testify if needed. The morning of the hearing, I met Luke and Mara at the courthouse. Luke stood tall in a button-down shirt that suddenly looked too small for his frame. When had he grown so much? You don't have to do this, I told him. I want to, he replied. Mom's lying. The hearing room was smaller than I expected, more cramped. Kendra sat at one table with her attorney. Darren was in the gallery again, his face set in what he probably thought was supportive concern, but looked more like smug satisfaction. When Kendra took the stand, she dabbed at invisible tears, describing how I'd changed after learning about her relationship with Darren. How I'd grown unpredictable and frightening, how she feared for her safety. I watched her performance with a strange detachment, wondering how I'd ever loved someone capable of such lies. Darren shifted in his seat, nodding dramatically at certain moments in her testimony. When the judge wasn't looking, he glared at me with unconcealed hatred. At one point, he actually stood up, trying to interrupt Alicia's cross-examination. Sir, the judge said sharply, you are not a party to this case. Your continued attempts to involve yourself are inappropriate and will be noted in the record. Sit down or be removed. Darren sank back into his seat, his face flushed. When it was our turn, Alicia was methodical. She showed the security footage with timestamps. She presented my workshop records. Mara testified calmly about where I'd been staying. And then Luke took the stand. He spoke clearly, describing the parking lot exchange exactly as it had happened. When Kendra's attorney asked if I seemed angry or aggressive, Luke shook his head. My dad doesn't talk like that, he said simply. He never has. The judge reviewed all the evidence and then addressed the courtroom. I'm denying this protective order, she stated firmly. Not only is there no evidence supporting these allegations, there is substantial evidence contradicting them. She turned directly to Kendra. Ms. Barrett, the court takes domestic violence very seriously. False claims waste resources and damage the credibility of genuine victims. I'm ordering you to pay Mr. Barrett's attorney's fees for this hearing. Outside the courthouse, I hugged Luke tightly, whispering, Thank you. Alicia pulled me aside as we walked to the parking lot. That arrogance will cost him, she said quietly. What do you mean? Darren's behavior in court. I've filed a motion to admit his involvement into the record, including the hotel receipts and texts. I also subpoenaed his HR file showing Kendra as his direct manager. Their company has a strict policy against supervisors dating subordinates. I nodded, understanding. So both their jobs could be at risk, yes? We parted ways, and I drove Luke back to Mara's place, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. That evening, as we were finishing dinner, Mara's phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, then handed it to me with a small smile. It's my friend from HR at Meridian Corp, she said. Kendra and Darren's workplace. I took the phone, my heart suddenly racing. Cole, this is Janet. Just wanted you to know, HR has formally opened an investigation into both of them based on the court documents that were forwarded to the compliance department. Thought you'd want to know? I sat in my truck outside Meridian Corporation, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. I wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't my fight anymore. But something pulled me to this parking lot today. Some need to witness the consequences unfold in real time. Through the glass front doors, I spotted Kendra walking briskly toward the HR department, her posture rigid with anger. 15 minutes later, Darren hurried through the same doors, his tie slightly askew. Neither of them noticed my truck parked across the lot. Janet, Mara's friend from HR, had called me last night with a heads up. The investigation meeting is tomorrow at 9. Just thought you'd want to know the timeline. I remembered how Kendra had smiled at company parties, introducing me as her husband while keeping her hand on Darren's arm a beat too long. I remembered the weekends she'd missed Luke's games for emergency meetings that somehow always involved Darren. Now the company knew exactly what those meetings had been. My phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. Documents delivered to HR yesterday. All properly redacted for privacy but clear on timeline and supervisory relationship. I didn't reply. Instead, I watched the building, feeling neither joy nor sadness, just a strange, hollow vindication. After 40 minutes, Darren emerged first, practically stomping across the parking lot to his car. His face was flushed, and he slammed his door hard enough that I could hear it across the lot. 10 minutes later, Kendra appeared, clutching her purse like a shield. She slid into her car and sat there for several minutes, head down. I started my engine and drove away before either of them noticed me. I had seen enough. When I got home that afternoon, Kendra was waiting in the kitchen. She must have come straight from Meridian. Her eyes were red-rimmed but fierce. "You went after my career," she spat, throwing her purse onto the counter. "Are you happy now?" I leaned against the door frame, keeping my distance. "I didn't go after anything. The court documents are public record. You made sure they saw everything. They've suspended both of us pending review." Her voice cracked slightly. "You had no right. You destroyed your own career, Kendra," I said quietly. "You broke the company rules when you started sleeping with your subordinate. You broke the law when you lied in court. Those were your choices. I built that department from nothing, 5 years of my life, and you risked it all for hotel rooms with Darren." I kept my voice even. "You made that choice too." She ran her hands through her hair, pacing the kitchen floor. "What am I supposed to do now? What if they fire me?" "The same thing I've been doing since you announced you were leaving me at our son's graduation dinner," I said. "Figure it out and move forward." She stared at me, searching for some crack in my resolve, some sign that I might help her. Finding none, she snatched her purse back up. "This isn't over," she said, but the threat sounded hollow now. "It's been over since you made your announcement," I replied. "The rest is just paperwork." After she left, I heard the familiar sound of Luke's key in the door. He'd been staying at the house more since the protective order was dismissed, slowly reclaiming his space. "Hey, Dad," he called, dropping his backpack by the stairs. "In the kitchen." He joined me, pulling scholarship applications from his folder and spreading them across the table. For the next hour, we sat together in comfortable silence, the scratch of his pen against paper the only sound between us. "We're almost through this storm," I told him, reaching over to squeeze his shoulder. He nodded, not looking up from his forms. "I know, Dad. I know." The next morning, my phone rang while I was loading lumber at the workshop. It was Janet from HR again. "It's official," she said without preamble. "Darren Hayes has been terminated with cause effective immediately. No severance, no references." I set down the plank I was holding. "And Kendra?" "Demoted. Significant salary reduction. She'll be reporting to her former assistant now." Janet paused. "The whole company knows. Word travels fast." I thanked her and hung up, feeling a strange weight lift from my shoulders. Not happiness, I wasn't sure I'd feel that for a while yet, but something like relief. Later that day, I received a text from an unknown number. "You happy now? This was all your fault. Darren." I blocked the number without responding. That evening, I picked up dinner from Luke's favorite burger place. We needed something normal, something that reminded us of better days. As we ate, I could hear Kendra's raised voice through the phone when Luke excused himself to take her call. "No, Mom, I can't come over tonight," he said firmly. "I have applications to finish." When he returned to the table, his expression was troubled. "They're fighting," he said quietly. "Darren went to her apartment. He's freaking out about money." I nodded but didn't pry. This wasn't my battle anymore. 3 days later, Luke came home from visiting Kendra's new apartment, his face grim. "Darren showed up while I was there," he said, dropping onto the couch beside me. He was yelling about needing money, about how she promised to take care of him if things went south. I waited, letting Luke process what he'd seen. Mom kept saying she could barely pay her own rent now. He knocked over a lamp and slammed the door when he left. She was crying and screaming after him. Luke looked up at me, his eyes suddenly older than his years. Their whole relationship was built on lies, wasn't it? Yes, I said simply. And lies don't hold up under pressure. 3 weeks later, I sat beside Alicia in the courtroom for our final divorce hearing. The wooden bench felt solid beneath me, grounding me in the moment I'd been working toward for months. Alicia's portfolio was neatly arranged on the table, evidence of every step we'd taken to reach this conclusion. Across the aisle, Kendra sat alone, her attorney beside her, but Darren nowhere to be seen. The strain of recent weeks had left its mark on her. Her shoulders curved forward slightly, and the polished confidence she'd walked in with during our first hearing had dimmed to something harder and more brittle. "Darren's termination letter has already been entered into the record," Alicia whispered, nodding toward a document in the judge's stack. "Along with the HR findings." I nodded, keeping my eyes forward. "Luke, his preference statement is there too." The bailiff called the court to order and Judge Harmon reviewed the files before her. I caught Kendra glancing back toward the door, perhaps still hoping Darren might appear to support her. He didn't. "We're prepared to proceed with final orders, Your Honor," Alicia stated, rising to her feet. "We've submitted additional documentation of Mr. Barrett's consistent involvement in their son Luke's life." She presented a folder containing years of school attendance logs showing my signature, coaching schedules for Luke's baseball teams, and affidavits from teachers confirming my presence at every parent-teacher conference. Luke's own statement, expressing his wish to live primarily with me, sat on top. "Mr. Barrett has been the steady presence in Luke's daily life," Alicia continued. "The evidence supports our proposed parenting plan." The judge flipped through the documents, occasionally nodding. When Kendra's attorney attempted to challenge the parenting time proposal, the judge held up her hand. "Counselor, the record speaks for itself. Mr. Barrett has demonstrated consistent involvement, and the child has expressed a clear preference. I see no compelling reason to deviate from that." Judge Harmon delivered her ruling methodically. The house remained mine through my mother's trust, protected as separate property. Luke's college fund stayed untouchable in its trust with Mara as trustee. Primary parenting time went to me based on Luke's preference and my proven record of involvement. The marital property was split fairly, our retirement accounts, vehicles, and other assets divided according to law. But Kendra's attempted dissipation, the money spent on hotels and gifts during her affair, was accounted for and reduced her share accordingly. Furthermore, the judge added, "I'm imposing sanctions for Mrs. Barrett's misconduct in filing a false protective order in the amount of $3,500 in attorney's fees to be paid to Mr. Barrett." Kendra's face tightened as she stared straight ahead. Her attorney leaned over to whisper something, but she shook her head sharply. When we stood to leave, Kendra rushed past without looking at me. Alicia squeezed my arm. "It's done, Cole. You did everything right." I nodded, feeling strangely hollow. Not sad, not elated, just empty, like the aftermath of a storm. Later that afternoon, I stood in the kitchen when I heard Kendra's key in the door. She'd come to collect the last of her personal items before the movers arrived for the furniture she'd been awarded. She stepped into the kitchen, surveying the half-empty cabinets where I'd already separated our dishes according to the property list. "You humiliated me," she said, her voice quieter now than in all our previous confrontations. "You humiliated yourself," I replied evenly. "I refuse to join you." She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter we'd picked out together years ago. "You'll be alone." "I've been alone for a while," I told her, "and it's still better than being lied to." A flash of something, hurt maybe, or anger, crossed her face before she tried one more sharp edge. "Darren says you'll regret this." "Darren can't even keep a job," I said flatly. "Tell him good luck explaining that gap on his resume." She held my gaze for a long moment before reaching into her pocket. The house key made a small, final sound as she placed it on the counter between us. The movers came an hour later. I watched from the front window as they loaded the furniture she'd been awarded into their truck. When they pulled away, I walked through each room, then changed every lock and reset the alarm code. Standing alone in the quiet kitchen, I took a deep breath that finally felt full and unrestrained. The house was mine again. The air was clear. For the first time in months, I could breathe without waiting for the next blow. A week after the final decree came through, I was standing on a stepladder with a paintbrush in my hand, adding a fresh coat of blue to the porch swing. The old finish had weathered badly through winter, and something about seeing it renewed felt right. The front door opened and Mara poked her head out. "Coffee's ready when you are," she called, holding up a mug. "And I brought those lemon bars Luke likes." "Be there in 5, I answered, finishing the last section with careful strokes. Inside, I washed paint from my hands and settled at the kitchen table. Mara had already arranged her infamous lemon bars on a plate, tart enough to make your eyes water, sweet enough to keep you coming back. She'd been bringing them every Sunday since the divorce finalized. "I hung Luke's graduation photo this morning," I said, nodding toward the living room. "About time," she replied. "That frame's been sitting on your desk for months." We both knew why. For too long, that picture had reminded me of what should have been a perfect day, before Kendra shattered it with her announcement. Now it was just my son in his cap and gown, smiling with genuine pride. I'd reclaimed the memory by focusing on what mattered: him. My phone buzzed with a text from Luke. I smiled as I read it. "Let me guess," Mara said. "Another cafeteria food complaint?" "Mystery meatloaf," I confirmed, showing her the unappetizing photo. But he also sent his first biology quiz result. 92%. "That's our boy," she said, pride warming her voice. Luke was thriving at State, his tuition covered by the trust fund no one could touch. He'd settled into his dorm room, joined a study group, and even signed up for intramural baseball. His texts came daily, sometimes just funny observations about campus life, other times deeper check-ins about how I was doing. "Have you heard anything?" Mara asked cautiously. She didn't need to specify who she meant. "Kendra's renting near her sister's place," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "She kept the newer car and the furniture she wanted so badly, even though it never really fit in here." What I didn't say was how quickly her plans had collapsed. The demotion at work had cut her salary by almost 30%. Without my income to supplement hers, she was struggling with rent and car payments. As for Darren, he hadn't lasted through autumn. His HR termination with cause had followed him to every interview. No severance, no references, no explanation that didn't make him look worse. Word around town was that he'd moved back into his parents' basement, patching together delivery shifts while his credit card debt mounted. Their new life had evaporated before it even took shape. "That's not our problem anymore," Mara said, reading my thoughts. "No," I agreed. "It's not. That wasn't cruelty talking. It was just the invoice betrayal sends to its author." I didn't need to gloat about their situation. The facts spoke for themselves. I walked to the living room and straightened Luke's graduation photo on the mantel. The frame held just him, not the family shot we'd taken before dinner. Just my son, his achievement, his future. "You know what I've learned?" I said, returning to the kitchen. "Peace isn't fireworks. It's just the absence of chaos." Mara nodded. "And consequences aren't cinematic, they're cumulative. And they land exactly where they belong," I finished. "If you drove past my house today, you'd see that freshly painted porch swing and the graduation photo prominently displayed. You'd see a man who rebuilt quietly, with care rather than rage. And if you're sitting in your car right now after being blindsided by someone you trusted, wondering if you're weak for not screaming, let me tell you, you're not. You're strong enough to let proof do the shouting. Protect your home, protect your kids, look your betrayer and the fool who enabled them in the eye and make your boundary a fact, not a feeling." After I finished painting that day, I hung a new key hook by the front door. Just one peg. Mine. Some doors you close for good. Some futures you lock in. Justice isn't loud. It's tidy. And it lasts. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.